This episode is brought to you by San Pellegrino Ciao. A gift from Italy to your home. San Pellegrino Ciao is a flavored sparkling water made with real fruit juice, finished with a pinch of Sicilian salt for a perfectly balanced taste. So which flavor will you choose? Peach, lime, blood orange, cherry, or maybe the all-new limoncello? Crafted in Italy with 0 grams of added sugar. San Pellegrino Ciao. Buy it now.
The process within democracy is called the parliamentary standards process. That's why I started this interview by asking you if you accept that there are rules that apply to MPs, including Nigel Farage. I mean, you said yes, but it doesn't sound like you meant it.
I'm surprised you're not focusing on the fact that the National Crime Agency leaked one of our MPs' bank statements to The Guardian. Yeah, I do.
You don't know where it came from?
We have proof of it. Of course I do.
What's the proof?
We have proof that it came from the National Crime Agency.
What is the proof?
I don't have it myself. You're going to have to ask Richard Tice.
Okay, so we're just going to take your word from that.
When we talk about an establishment stitch-up against Nigel, this is what we're talking about.
Yeah, some sort of deep state conspiracy against you, do you? Running from the National Crime Agency to the Parliamentary Standards Commissioner.
Those are your words. You can make of it as you wish. I think the public will decide, and that's why we need a democratic mandate.
Layla Cunningham, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Riot. Welcome to Quiet Riot B-Side, the Cooler Heads deep dive companion to our Newsy Thursday chat. I'm Andreou.
And I'm Naomi Smith.
And I'm Kenny.
We're going to be delving into the detail of Burnhamism. What do we know? What do we hope? And what shape will it all take?
To help us with all that, it's MP for Loughborough, Jeevun Sandher.
Thank you for having me. This is brilliant.
Before we begin today, we've got some pretty exciting news. We are getting together with the amazing people behind the Lincoln Project. That's one of the most effective organisations at battling Trump, and with our friends over at Byline Times. And we're putting together a very special live show at the Leicester Square Theatre in London. It's not long, it's on the 30th of July. We're going to leave the ticket link in the show notes. And if you're a Ko-Fi backer who's coming along, do drop us a message to quietriotpod@gmail.com once you've bought your ticket, and we'll let you know which pub we'll be in after the show for a bit of a meet and a greet and a sup as well. So please get signed up at ko-fi.com/quietriotpod before the 30th of July. We cannot wait to meet lots of you in the flesh, and hopefully you buy me a beer.
Listeners, it's time to dim the lights, get comfy, and settle down for Quiet Riot B-Side.
Jeevun, before we turn to your probable new boss...
Very probable.
It is only right to ask, what would Sandherism look like? How would you define that?
We had this basically, I think it comes down to a pub, a playground, and prosperity in every community.
Hey.
That's in policy terms. And then in...
But wait. A pub?
A playground and prosperity.
Okay, what happens in the pub? People
what happens?
Come together,
the whole thing is that people don't connect enough, right?
Yeah.
And we don't have enough of it, and therefore we've lost something together. Pubs, obviously, people like pubs, but playground is another place that I'm told that people also do mix. I wouldn't know because I don't have kids, but like
mums and dads having chats and
there you go, right?
And
the prosperity is how do you get good jobs in there without something that begins with P. Which we couldn't quite come up with. We couldn't quite get defence in there. And then in political terms, it's that together we will, but divided we won't.
Yeah, love that. Great.
And that's that.
Very good.
We can end it there, can't we?
Yeah.
Job done.
I mean, I would suggest, given the current atmospheric conditions, pubs, playgrounds and popsicles might get you even further, but I digress.
I don't think the listeners know just how hot it is in this room. I can tell you now, everyone's getting to know each other on a sensory level.
Down, Alex, down.
There's a lot of pheromones. Parliament's been even worse for that. I
did not know. Mine.
They say make connection with your colleagues, but I was not expecting quite what I've been getting.
Oh, dear. So what do we actually know about Burnhamism, and what are we just projecting onto him because we want it to be true? We can say with some confidence what it isn't. It isn't Starmerism with a Manchester accent. It isn't just a return to some imagined Milibandite comfort zone either. What it is, or claims to be, is looser on fiscal orthodoxy, keener on devolution, and more comfortable with talking to voters like a human being than a spreadsheet. But there are lots we genuinely don't know yet. How he squares borrowing to invest with spooking the markets, whether devolution means real accountability or more photo ops for regional mayors, and whether his chattier comm style survives contact with the actual pressure of governing. One of the clearest signals will be who he keeps and who he moves. If Shabana Mahmood stays at the Home Office, what does that tell us about his instincts on immigration and how much continuity he wants there? Will he promote fresh thinking from within the 2024 intake? And what would that say about how serious he is on embracing new ideas? Which appointments look like genuine ideological statements and which are just the usual balancing act of party management? So, Jeevun, we should probably begin by asking you what you think Burnhamism isn't and how much of it might just be wishful projection from people who already like him onto him. Like, how would you say, well, it's certainly not this?
It's a good question. It depends. I mean, the thing that's difficult there is how do I know what they're projecting? Because the things they are certainly seeing is the brand and, if you like, the kind of attitude and behaviors, right? Like, to your point, they're seeing someone who can both attract attention, which is ever more important given where we are in the economy, but do so in a positive way. Like, he communicates incredibly well and they get the empathy and they get the leadership. So I think that's what they're definitely seeing. But in terms of projection otherwise, I mean, the question is, what are they projecting? And the truth is that we have a huge job to do. And I think Andy would say exactly the same thing, which is there's so much to fix. And, you know, this definitely won't be all sorted when he comes into office on
day
Monday.
One, no. And so let's have a little listen to him talking about economics, because you rightly said yesterday on our show that voters are going to be mostly thinking about, am I going to be better off or not? Let's have a little listen.
We will bring about the biggest rebalancing of power our country has seen. It is time for Whitehall to accept that growth cannot be ordered from the top down. Instead, it can only be nurtured from the bottom up. The change will be the biggest change in our lifetimes to the way the country is run, and it is consistent with the 2024 manifesto. We will create a more streamlined state with a clearer purpose to power up all parts of the country and put a laser-like focus on growth and regeneration.
So he has talked about loosening fiscal rules and borrowing to invest, borrowing to build. Is there a version of this that won't spook the markets? Or, you know, is that tension basically now unresolvable? Like, anything you do other than the kind of fiscal rules that Rachel Reeves has imposed is just likely to do that?
Well, look, I'm a fiscal credibility hawk, right? I've worked in finance ministries across the world. One of the reasons, the reasons I'm backing Andy, but one of them is definitely that he's turned around and gone, no. Yes, we have to have a credible path. Yes, we're sticking with the fiscal rules. And yes, we can still transform the country. And there are ways to do that. There are different choices within that package. So the thing I would be really clear about is you've got to have that as to give a credible path for markets. Yeah. What you can't do is wish away the constraints that you face. Yeah. And the fiscal rules indicate them, but what they also do is send out a signal to markets. I think sometimes people think that you can kind of buck a trend, but the truth is the price of this stuff falls back to fundamentals, like all the time. And if you are issuing more bonds, you're effectively saying you're going to borrow more and spend more, and that itself has an impact on the price. But Andy's been very clear about that.
It depends what you're spending it on. The markets will react based on the comms that you give them about, we're not doing this to, do a big pond outside the White House or a ballroom. Exactly, the signals.
That I agree with. So the thing with Liz Truss was it stopped being about fundamentals and started being like, this is mad. Yeah. We're all fleeing UK assets. And at this time, you have to have a credible path. And I do agree that if you have a credible path forward, that is something to react to. And so, look, Andy's been very clear about that. I think we've changed the countries in some ways already so far. And obviously the future plans will be set out. But to be clear, as Andy has said, we're sticking with the fiscal rules and we completely understand that the markets do buy our debt.
I would invoke what Mariana Mazzucato puts really, really well, which is that the markets are interested not just in the in the enumerator, but what's under the line. You know, that ratio is formed of two things.
Yep.
And if you're borrowing, if you're making the number on top go up, in order to make the number at the bottom rise at a much faster rate, as in GDP growth, then the markets react positively. Actually, markets love government spending. That's the truth. They like government spending money if it's spent on stuff that will result in growth.
That's the point.
That's where the truss thing became a complete farce, in that she took money out of the Treasury's coffers.
With no growth. Are you hearing anything from Camp Burnham, more widely, not necessarily just him, that would help you define what you think his economic approach will be?
From satellite figures, people who are advising Burnham directly or indirectly, what I'm getting is that there is a search for alternatives, at the very least. There is a keenness not to go outside the terms of the manifesto. There is a keenness to show fiscal responsibility, but that there was maybe an overly orthodox interpretation of those things that came before. Like the manifesto and the fiscal rules, they allow borrowing to invest. And when you're looking at things like defense, there is nothing to say you can't borrow money to invest in defense, in assets that are even owned by the state. Like you could start a program for putting together drones
or anti-drone
in private-public partnership. Or, there's nothing to prevent the state from borrowing to make that kind of investment. If the markets look at that and think it's a reasonable bet, they will react well. I think what the markets react poorly to is indecision, is sort of saying one thing and then resiling from it, which sadly we have seen a little bit of in the last couple of years. What do you think?
I think, look, there are real constraints at the moment, in the sense that inflation is high. And so at the moment, if you are, whatever you're thinking about spending, you've got to be aware that if the bank also thinks that's going to lead to more inflation, they're more likely to raise interest rates, which has another impact. There's a real constraint there. And I wouldn't look at it from the view of, don't worry, like these constraints are going to go away. The way I would view it instead is, yes, the constraints exist, but how can I change the country within those constraints? And what else am I going to do on the rest of the decisions? I can't comment upon each and every decision he's going to make, obviously. But what I can say is, to your point about growth, I think you see a couple of things come out of his thinking, which I think are, very pro-growth, to your point, and that we should be excited for, and that I'm excited about, right? The devolution one's, I think, the first thing. And the reason why that's exciting is because there's lots of growth opportunities outside of London that by just not getting the basics right, we've not really got on the pitch. And so to your point, if you're having transport infrastructure that's boosting growth, and this particular setting is if you can kind of show that growth to the OBR, then you are showing something, a way forward by which you can have the economy growing.
It's changing that ratio.
Yeah.
And you're changing that. There's another idea, I think, around good jobs. I mean, talked about reindustrialization. Okay, we're creating good jobs to everybody. To your point, it's increasing the productive capacity of the economy and moving forward. And some of the stuff around common ownership, around council homes, around the rest of it, it gets down cost per household, it gets spending up in local areas. There are some real signs of it, but I would also say the constraints definitely still exist.
Quiet Riot. Starting or growing your own business can be intimidating and lonely at times. Your to-do list may feel endless with new tasks, and lists can easily begin to overrun your life. So finding the right tool that not only helps you out, but simplifies everything as a built-in business partner can be a game changer. For millions of businesses, that tool is Shopify. Shopify is the commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world and 10% of all e-commerce in the US. From household names like Gymshark, Rare Beauty, and Heinz, to brands just getting started. Shopify has hundreds of ready-to-use templates that can help you build a beautiful online store that matches your brand's style. And you can tackle all the important tasks in one place, from inventory to payments to analytics and more. No need to save multiple websites or try to figure out what platform is hosting the tool that you need. And if people haven't heard about your brand, you can get the word out like you have a marketing team behind you, with easy-to-run email and social media campaigns. to reach customers wherever they're scrolling or strolling. Start your business today with the industry's best business partner, Shopify, and start hearing. Sign up for your $1 per month trial today at shopify.com/realm. Go to shopify.com/realm. That's shopify.com/realm.
Quiet, Riot. Alex, I think you can get the measure of a man or woman based on who they appoint around them.
Yeah.
Okay. So what were different appointments to, let's confine it to like the great officers of state. Tell us about how he intends to govern. Like which of the early appointments will we read as like an ideological signal rather than party management?
I mean, obviously, Chancellor of the Exchequer is the key thing that we're all wanting to see in terms of which direction he goes. The gear is in neutral at the moment.
Yeah.
And it will be very interesting to see whether he switches to first, reverse, or third, you know? Mm-hmm. And that will be the biggest hint we'll get from that. Now, instead of talking about another office, can I talk about another person? Because I think what he does with Burnham and Mood will be the other single most important signal that he gives. And how is that read? Is it read as if saying that, do you know what, guys? I'm going to leave the law and order and border stuff to you, the right-wing rump of the party, because that's the thing you have loads of fun with, and that's where actually, in terms of optics, I don't mind looking tough. Or does he make a change there and signal that he disagrees fundamentally, philosophically, with this kind of tough approach, this sort of tough approach that ends up only feeding the narrative of the far-right candidates at the moment. And so I think those are two things that I would be looking at. In terms of smaller briefs, and I do say that very much in scare quotes, I would also look at who he puts in the environment brief, because I think that's another important...
Miliband is out and into number 11. Yeah.
Because I think that's a really important signal of whether he takes that seriously or not so much, and also of whether he is going to go to the barricades and fight on something that has now become a divisive issue between parties, with both the Conservatives and Reform claiming that let's do away with all this net zero stuff. So for me, who he appoints in that position will be a massive signal of whether he's willing to go to war over that stuff or not.
Curveball, I'm going to be looking out for the appointment of Chief Whip. Mm-hmm. Back to what we were talking about earlier, and Jeevun, you'll appreciate this. If you intend to lead your party in a way that says, I am open to challenge, I am open to innovative thinking, I am open to different tribes within social democracy coming forward with solutions, then you will not govern in the brittle, if you are not completely with us, you are against us, or against me and how I'm governing, and therefore I will withdraw the whip immediately and you'll be cast into the backbenches and the other side of the floor, along with Jeremy Corbyn and Zara Sultana and others. I think if you are confident in your ism and your vision, you will be able to be a bit more flexible on that kind of stuff. So I think the shape, I'm not going to name names, but I think the shape of person that he puts into that chief whip role will
name
be...
a name.
No, I honestly haven't even got
one.
But...
Can I throw another curveball?
Someone like Emily, I think, would send a signal about in that role.
She'd be such a good dominatrix.
But also someone who is kind of a mother figure. You know, she would bring the party together. She would have no compunction in dealing with people that she thought was out of line.
Yeah.
But that wouldn't be her first instinct. Her first instinct would be to bring people together, to convince them to feed stuff up that's going wrong. And so I think she would be a really good chief whip.
And an even better foreign secretary.
Oh, yeah, here.
Yeah, agreed.
There's one other position that doesn't exist at the moment that I'd be looking out for with interest. That's who runs Number 10 North. Somebody's going to have to be put in charge of that.
Yeah, that's true.
And they're going to have a huge amount of authority, you'd have thought. Well.
Or Louise.
Or Louise.
Both would be very good choices.
And wouldn't they
or Lucy Powell.
And the politics of those three appointments actually are really very good appointments from his perspective. And they also show a willingness to be serious about the devolution aspects as well. So it's going to be his right-hand woman or right-hand man up there. They have to be good. And that's going to paint a picture for me, I think.
Well, I want to come back to you on devolution. That is the headline word that we took from the speech last week. And everyone loves it in theory. So what model of devolution was real accountability rather than just politicians grabbing power without the responsibility that comes with it? Do you think Burnham is trying to get the country to? And as an MP, do you get constituents asking you about local powers? Like, is it a thing you feel voters are crying out for?
Yeah, well, in one sense, because voters will sometimes come to their MP and in quite a lot of cases, we're just going, I now need to go and either direct you or talk to the county council, etc. Yeah. I'm also in an area that doesn't have a mayor.
Yeah.
And it makes such a big difference having one and not having one.
Oh, really?
Go on,
yeah, it
explain
definitely
that.
does.
Explain
the
that
mayor, first of all, is a kind of a single person who can fight for your county.
Yeah.
There is funding that comes attached to that mayoralty. They're able to make strategic projects. They're able to do things in a way that's much harder for like what ends up being a county council and a borough council, etc., all interacting together. You only have one person having the powers that also aren't in Whitehall.
Yeah.
It does make a difference. So, I've seen my colleagues just down the road who have that mayor with those powers.
Because there was a referendum in the Northeast 2 decades ago now, I think, under the Blair government, about a form of devolution for that area. And the local people rejected it because it wasn't meaningful devolution. So how does Burnham make it meaningful? Like, what are the actual... Like, would you say to a devolved area, actually, you can have a say in immigration policy? I mean, like, what has to stay at the Whitehall level and what can realistically go down to
So at the moment, I think
regions?
You've got planning, you've got skills, you've got transport, I think, at the moment at the mayoral level. The thing to say is that, again, I live in Leicestershire where those powers aren't yet with you. You talk about the North East, I think it's really interesting. What I think is really interesting now is areas that do have mayors, would they go back? I.e., would they say, no, I don't want this devolution anymore? I think it was really hard to sell the counterfactual back then. I think you've seen it.
Bristol did.
Bristol voted to get rid of its mayor, yeah.
Did the mayor have a strategic authority role? I can't remember what had the mayor.
So, no,
I don't think so. No.
So I think in that regard, because you want your mayor to cover a bigger area,
Yeah.
like in
No,
Manchester.
it may not have been the right kind of
mayor.
Yeah.
And
power
also,
base.
Andy being there will be a very clear statement of this is what can happen. And Manchester has done incredibly well. Like, it grew much faster, deprivation
but
fell
it
out,
hasn't
productivity
reindustrialised.
jobs.
Manchesterism hasn't meant reindustrialisation. It's the service sector that's boomed in Manchester under Burnham's watch. So where do those two things intersect?
I think you've got the good jobs, which I would see as being the more kind of like what's happened in Manchester was far more good jobs that came forward. I think it's fair to say that industrialisation has also changed. And at one point, you need basically space to have industrialisation. So would you see it in the centre of Manchester? Probably not. Do you see it more in the outlying areas? Yeah, where you can connect to those areas. So I would view it as slightly different.
Yeah.
And I think I'd also view it as the juxtaposition of deindustrialisation meant the loss of good jobs.
Yeah,
so when Andy talks about that, he kind of is talking about, I grew up in a time when people had good jobs, or my parents did, and they got to leave school and their friends did. And then we were growing up in an era where that just was no longer the case.
Quiet, Riot. Queen Carvania stood haloed by the morning sun. An army hung on her every word.
My champions, I have sold my chariot on Carvana. 'Twas a lovely SUV, an inexplicably queenly offer. They're even coming to the castle to collect it. Tonight, we feast. An offer you can feast on. Sell your car today on Carvana. Pickup fees may apply.
Quiet, Riot. Kenny, his comm style is a lot more informal than Starmer's sort of cheeky Instagram videos and so on. Is that prime ministerial, or will he have to basically cut it out when he's in office? Or do you think everyone will breathe a sigh of relief after years of technocracy and go, oh, thank heavens,
some personality,
an actual person.
An actual person. I mean, we've got plenty of case studies. Obama's probably the ultimate case study of somebody who has got communications in a very relaxed style off to a T. And he could be very effective, but he was also very dignified in that approach as well.
Yes, that's true. And one doesn't think of Obama as not presidential.
No.
Because...
And as mayor, he's had his weekly radio programme.
Absolutely.
Up in Manchester, and has kept that going throughout.
So on the
leadership role,
and we've seen what he's got the chops for it. That famous episode during lockdown when he was live on camera when the disappointing Manchester funding figures came through, and off the bat he was able to react to that in a very statesmanlike way, I thought. But the real test, I suspect, it isn't how statesmanlike he is when everything's going well. I think it's whether his approach survives crises, whether it survives the trade-offs, whether it survives the hostile interviews that are going to be coming his way, not whether it works in a friendly TikTok video. Because things will catch fire. They do. That's what happens. It's
one of your MPs will be embroiled in a major scandal. You've got 400 plus of them. It's inevitable.
Yeah. I mean, in dramatic terms, if I can speak for a moment in theatrical terms, they might work even better, those moments, because light and shade, always.
Authenticity as well.
To see someone who is normally jovial and relaxed, to see them grave or
gear.
somber on a particular occasion can have an even bigger effect than someone like Starmer, who's kind of grave and somber by design all the time.
And come on Hillsborough, he has managed that time and again. He has been a very good
after a
somber,
very bad start.
After a very, very, very bad start. But maybe that was, the best possible training he could have had for it.
Overall, people can be certain of one thing of me. I read some of the commentary. I am not indisciplined when it comes to the public finances. I've run Greater Manchester, the fastest growing city region in the country, for a decade. And you can't make it the fastest growing city region in the country, Andrew, without strong business confidence. I actually get frustrated at some of the narrative that people try to put around about me. My record says otherwise. There is some room within that manifesto for movement on tax. So if you take business rates, for instance, I believe there is a case for higher business rates on warehouses and the major developments we see on the outskirts of our cities, so that we can cut business rates for pubs, and I've proposed a 20% cut, and lift some high street businesses out of business rates altogether.
Lord O'Neill, one of the economists reportedly advising Burnham, has called for an overhaul of the tax system in an open letter, backing a new report by the UCL Institute for Global Prosperity. Incrementalism will not fix Britain, the letter says. Do we have some sympathy for this general principle?
Don't get me in trouble with a future chancellor or
no,
a current one.
No, come on.
Is the
now
answer.
Is the time,
No, now is any of those decisions. People are welcome to speculate. I definitely wouldn't. I know it's frustrating, but I would wait for that moment, basically. Or I would...
You would wait for what moment? Sorry.
I would wait for
the appointment of the new chancellor.
I would wait for whoever Andy's going to pick and whoever they're going to discuss about.
But don't you feel you can influence who Andy's going to pick? That's the point. You are
You're going to get me into so much.
No, we won't get into
you can influence.
Different question then. Incrementalism versus radicalism. Mm-hmm. We are a G7 nation. It doesn't feel like it. We are the G7 nation most at risk of needing an IMF bailout if there is another major shock to our economy. Now, thankfully, the Iran situation seems to be resolving. OBR have revised growth figures up. But the status quo has been failing people for decades now. The underlying structural issues we've got. And at New Economics Foundation, I know that your alma mater and others, they do talk about some pretty big, bold things that need to be done. So is the essence of what Jim O'Neill is proposing one that you would agree with?
Well, I said... The question is, I mean, I haven't actually seen the letter with what Jim O'Neill wrote, so I'm not really sure either way. In terms of your point, though, about what you're basically saying is, well, to paraphrase slightly, things are really bad in this country. How do you fix them? And
is it tinkering at the edges, or is it quite wholesale reform?
I'd say that's the question, right? I think that what we're going to see is a lot more kind of ambition in that regard, and I wouldn't just view it through a fiscal lens. Is the thing I would really say, because we get slightly trapped in. Now, I'm not saying that investment doesn't matter, and I'm not saying that all this stuff doesn't matter. Of course it does, and given my background, I think about it a lot. But the other side of it is, for example, around how are decisions being made and where are they being made? That's a really, really important question about what's going on. Skills in university policy, for example. At the moment, you've got a situation where you've got some good jobs, basically for graduates living near major cities.
Yeah.
Okay, but that's both a good jobs problem and it's a training problem. Yeah. These problems aren't just around the side of fiscal side of it. The other thing to say is, we've got to be a lot more ambitious about where we are because, to your point, the problem with the affordability crisis isn't that people can't afford the bills at the moment, which they can't, which is at record lows, is they also just don't see a way for their kids to be able to live a decent life.
Yeah.
They're not viewing this and going, when we get out the tricky patch, it'll all be fine.
Okay.
They're looking at it going, I'm going to get out the tricky patch.
And there'll be another one.
And it's still going to be really hard.
So if I could take the question and the answer and synthesize them, might I say that somewhere between radicalism and incrementalism, there is what you're arguing, which is a holistic approach of looking at something horizontally and all the areas it impacts, rather than in vertical silos of saying this is just about economic policy, this is just about education policy, this is just housing.
Partly, but I would use the word ambitious rather than radical, is the way I would put it. Because actually, there are connotations with that word which I think perhaps are unhelpful. Whereas I would also kind of go, I'm really, really ambitious, but that doesn't mean I want to tear things up, right?
And it's interesting when you point out the G7 status, being close to needing a bailout, that 5 of the 6 remaining countries in the G7 have worse debt to GDP ratios than we do, and accumulating faster, and yet markets are more relaxed about them. Must be a reason for that, right?
Part of that is inflation risk on this side. Like, part of that is just they're seeing more inflation in the UK.
And the bank of last resort. If you're in the EU, the ECB is there. We are now no longer offered that safeguard and protection. So if you're lending and you're thinking, okay, well, look, they're not in a great place at the moment, but there is a central bank that is extremely large and healthy that can help them. We don't have that anymore.
You see, I think it's quite cyclical. I think it's weird. Markets round on countries when they sense a kind of weakness, because there's quite a lot of money to be made by betting against the country, by betting against bonds, by betting against the currency. They did that to Japan like 10 years ago. They did that to Greece 15 years ago. There is a sense in which they move like a pack.
Yeah.
My feeling is that if markets know that if they kind of go for you, you suddenly pull back and change strategy and change policy.
Change Prime Minister.
That becomes more of a reason to go for you, not less of a reason to go for you.
I wouldn't view it through that. Like, you've got a couple of things. Like, these people who, we issue, I think, about £250 billion of bonds a year. A lot of institutional investors and pension funds are buying it. It's not the case that people can kind of try and buck the fundamentals for a really long time. So when they are reacting, because in one sense, if I was to sit there and try and buck it, there's someone else to come in underneath me. Like, I would view the price as what's going on with inflation, what's going on with investment, and then, to your point, what's going on with political risk. Because something very interesting happened around trust, which was the bond rate was rising until the budget day, and then they went completely haywire on the day because they thought she was bonkers. But I would view it as the price and the fundamentals, and ask yourself, is the price justified? At the moment, I think you're seeing a lot of inflation risk in the UK, and they are worried about what we're going to do on that.
Quiet Riot. Quiet Riot.
Naomi, dare we ask how you think Europeanism fits into Burnhamism? So is there a sort of Burnhamism?
Well,
Burnham-Euromism.
Interesting what Jeevun says about whether GDP growth gets concentrated in one area or dispersed. Of course, what we now know from all of the work Best for Britain has done with Frontier is that most of the growth from European membership will be felt outside London and the South East, notably Jeevun in the Midlands, but also Yorkshire and the North West, obviously home to Andy Burnham's second number 10 unit. Now, I am optimistic because I do believe Burnham is a major pro-European. When we look at his speech from 2016, he framed Brexit as a betrayal of Britain's history of building international alliances. And he was very much a fortune teller because he argued that Britain leaving the EU could trigger a domino effect that would threaten NATO.
Yeah.
And look at where we are now in the week that NATO is meeting.
So
you know,
it was a good speech.
He also talked about, you know, it could threaten the UK's own union. He said it makes the second referendum in Scotland more likely. And he really leans into the history of the European Union. He tells the amazing story of Churchill and how it ended bloodshed on our continent. He warned that it would make us more vulnerable to Russian aggression, international terrorism, etc. So, look, I'm hopeful because I do think he gets it, and he certainly will understand the economics of it, and he will want to not spook the markets. He will want to be seen as a pro-business Prime Minister. So I'm hopeful. Now, that is not to say that I have heard anything or that there has been any very obvious signal, but reading what he has said previously, what we know his instincts are, I think the window of opportunity for pro-Europeanism within Burnhamism is very, very much wide open.
Could I just ask you, while I've got you, because you've spent your life neck deep in economics. One of the things I'm hearing increasingly is that growth for growth's sake is actually a very problematic scenario. How do you balance out the importance? Now, I know you're going to say they're both important, but the importance of growth, but the importance of vision, because, of course, vision is what you do with the growth when it arrives. The vision is what we bring to people to say, this is how your life may well improve if we get the growth. And the growth turns out to be an intermediate step rather than an end in itself. Which should come first, do you think? Vision or the growth?
I think if you get the vision right, you get the growth right. But also the other problem with so growth is, of course, important. And but the question is, you have a single number that summarizes growth in the country. What it doesn't tell you is, where is the country growing, right? Your economy could be growing at 3%, but London could be growing at 10% and everywhere else growing at 0.5%. And it's a very different picture. And so the question is every area growing and is every person and place sharing in it? And when you think about deindustrialization, what really happened was all the growth you had was in major cities, mostly going to graduates. And so you had growth and then New Labour basically redistributed it and invested elsewhere, and the Tories cut it. So the question is what your vision is and what does it mean in the country? I.e., growth as a number is a single number, but life itself and economic health is about more than just growth, or rather GDP, national GDP.
All right, final question for you, Jeevun. What would better intra-party communication look like in practice? Are cross-party caucuses built around expertise rather than factional lines in a realistic model? Or are they is it a nice idea that doesn't really survive contact with Westminster? Because the thing I really took from his big speech last week was just how plural he sounded and was prepared to be and has been as Mayor of Manchester.
I think that, the truth is, we get on a lot better when the cameras aren't on.
Yeah.
That's the actual truth.
Right.
That's
interesting.
In terms of common things, I mean, look, you had the choice at end of life bill come around last time. It will come around again. You obviously saw a lot of cross-party working then. The only things we notice are when there's a fight. Like, you guys don't see the stuff that's like there's no division.
Yeah.
When they literally don't, when we don't vote on legislation because no one opposes it, we always just focus on the things we disagree on. So it's natural to think of it that way.
But I think what Naomi means is that, like, you would get the European Research Group or whatever in the Tories, or the, they tend to coalesce around issues, while the Labour Party, the internal groupings, tend to coalesce around, left or centre, or and what would be nice, I think, would be to have a formalised way, especially in a party with 400 MPs. Don't you think it would help to have a kind of way for MPs to organise into groups around issues and policies and feed that into government in a regularised way, like the Secretary of State for this thing meeting with that the representative of the group that's interested in this, like once every couple of months.
But that does happen. I think it's just not public, or not as public as you would think it is. People do, but it's more because everyone's got so many issues going on at so many times. It's like, if you're interested in an issue, it is pretty common for the minister who's involved in that issue to meet with you as a group. That's pretty common.
Right.
It's just more that, like, there's so much going on all the time, and I mean, I was in the APPG for hydrogen, which I gave up when I got promoted, but I met with the minister, and the minister would come to meet the group, and it would, it's just not.
Yeah, but does it feed up to policy? Because one of the things that felt to me like the reasons the Starmer thing, the wheels came off, was that there wasn't that communication. That
or the flow
MPs
of ideas
in the party didn't feel that anything they were saying and feeding upwards had really much impact until it got to a vote and they got to embarrass the government, and then the government would listen. Yeah. So what I'm saying is this reset an opportunity to do something about that disconnect and say, let's listen to MPs before it gets to the embarrassing vote?
Well, let's not get to that point.
You can't
I think
just
it's
say
a fair
yes.
point. No, but like, there's something more about like what is the, because I think ideas did percolate, and I think there's always a better way to do it, and so it's quite.
But I think Burnhamism is about that. I do think, if I had to define Burnhamism right now in terms of approach to innovative ideas and an openness and a willingness to grab a good idea wherever it comes from, even if it isn't coming from my version of Labour tribe or soft left or wherever he positions himself. I do think he is somebody that is prepared to go, you know what, this group have had a really great idea and I'm going to take that forward, rather than be, oh, no, they're from a different part of the spectrum or party and therefore I can't be seen to be giving in to them on that.
I think you're right that Andy is very, very interested in, I mean, look, given the background, and you read the stuff he's written and what he's spoken about, I think it's fair to say he's very interested in ideas, and he's very interested in how that changes the country. And I suppose for him and for me, I wouldn't sit there and be too concerned about, like, is it from this Labour tribe or that Labour tribe? Yeah. Not something I've been super interested in. So, like, I think that's where he's going with it. I think on the other side of it, there's a question of attention, basically, in government, and time is always constrained.
Yeah.
It's just very, very difficult to, like, one thing I find harder about this job is that people are always coming to me with good ideas. Obviously, I'm not, so far up, but even at the local level, whenever people come to you with really good ideas.
And you haven't got the time to
enact or push it forward, because it's always, everything just takes time.
Yeah.
It takes time and takes time. So it is just hard.
A final question then for you, Kenny, that I am keen on because of your media background. Andy is the MP for Makerfield because Josh Simons resigned that seat. He did that after having had to quit his ministerial post over the allegations that when he was running Labour Together, he employed APCO to investigate journalists from Murdoch press as well as from left-leaning press. And that was, a pretty big scandal. The rumours are now that he's going to have a big job heading up the policy unit in Number 10. We know that the right-wing media will be out for any Labour PM from day one. Wouldn't an appointment like that unnecessarily set Burnham up for even more hostile attacks from the media?
I mean, it's an obvious call, but at the same time, a big appointment for him has to be made, given the sacrifice that he made to get Burnham into number 10. I think that there are...
But don't you just offer somebody a peerage and pack them off for a lifelong job there?
I suspect Simons has got more ambition than that at this stage in his career. Look, if Burnham does appoint him to that role in particular, he has to do something right up front. He's got to explain why. He's got to explain what safeguards exist to stop Simons misbehaving again. And he probably has to keep him away from any media-facing work as well, certainly in the early days. But I think it's Simons himself who needs to be really very, very careful, because if he is appointed to this role, he instantly becomes the ideal lightning conductor for anything even adjacent to policy work that looks like the wheels are coming off. So he's put in there, he's the sacrificial offering number one straight away.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure that he can win. In the short term, it might look like it's a win. There are too many people in the lobby still who would like to kick him in the shins, kick him hard.
Mm-hmm.
They would take a yellow card to get rid of him, let's put it like that.
Yeah.
So Simon's in a tough old corner.
Yeah. I think it might not altogether be a terrible thing to put someone in that prominent role who journalists might know is a bit of a dick and might go for them personally if they annoy him. That's. I don't want to name any names, but that's what other directors of communication have built their reputation on.
Absolutely.
It's not necessarily a bad thing for people to think, if I go for this person, I really must make sure I don't miss. So
Shoot to kill.
It cuts both ways.
Jeevun, what would you like our listeners to do?
I think the main thing is we're going to have the World Cup. I think you're going to listen to this just before the game.
That's right,
just before the game.
Right.
Talk to someone you don't normally talk to about it.
Great idea. That would be me talking to anyone about it, because I would never knowingly talk to anyone about football. So I will do absolutely that.
Cab driver.
Hey, great.
Now, unusually, this week's double episode has been filled with quite hopeful stories.
Yay!
But we still thought we would send you over the top with a cherry on top of the sundae. It's time for Grin and Share It.
Good news is welcome to me. Bad news is hell come to me. Good news. I want good news.
What have you got for us, Naomi?
Well, this week's Grin and Share It is actually going to come from a war zone.
Huh?
All right.
Okay, so in southwestern Ukraine, very near the front line, there is a village called Veselya Dolnya, which translates to Happy Valley.
That's brilliant.
And amid the sound of shelling, there has been a rewilding project bringing back a species that hasn't roamed the Ukrainian steppe in 200 years, wild donkeys, and they're called kulan. So there's a conservation group called Rewilding Ukraine, and they've released dozens of them, along with horses, red deer, water buffalo, even hamsters.
Hamsters?
Yep. Along 600 hectares of old Soviet farmland. And here's the clever bit. So the donkeys are basically fire engines, right? Firemen. Because their grazing keeps the dry grass down on the steppe, and that cuts the wildfire risk in a country that is now also dealing with landmines exploding in the heat of summer. So while we've been obviously very worried about the Ukraine front line, these donkeys are busy holding the actual line against wildfire. Talk about pulling your weight. There's also a bison success story over the border in Romania as well, where they have brought tourists to the area, and with them all of the things that go around that, bakeries, guest houses, and that has breathed life into these remote mountain villages that were declining. And so it's kind of proof that if you build it, or in this case release 40 bison, then they will come. And the loveliest detail is that back in Ukraine, in the spring of 2022, just as the invasion was happening, a Kulan foal was born in the wild there for the first time in 2 centuries. So small, wobbly, and totally oblivious to the war around it. This little baby was a proper reminder that nature just carries on getting on with things quietly, even when the humans are trying to destroy everything. So yeah, a nice pro-Ukraine, pro-rewilding, anti-fire Grin and Share It for you this week.
Oh, wow. I now have images of a Russian soldier coming face to face with a
Ukrainian
wild donkey.
Getting kicked in the shins.
What is this? Thanks, Naomi. Listeners, as ever, we'll drop a link in the show notes so you can not just grin, but also share it. I suspect this one has some quite nice photos to go with it.
It
got
does.
And that is the end of today's B-Side show. Another huge thank you to Jeevun for joining us today.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
And a hearty gracias to everyone else who's tuned in as well. Thank you all.
Tickets to our live show are selling like hotcakes. So if you want to come and see us alongside our friends at the Lincoln Project and Byline Times on the 30th of July at Leicester Square Theatre, make sure to grab your spot today. The link is down in the show notes.
And if you're signed up as a backer for $5 a month or more, we'll be letting you know where to find us after the show so we can have a drink together and chew the fat. Head over to ko-fi.com/QuietRiotPod to get on the guest list.
We'll be back at the weekend with Sunday School. So until then, stay cool, stay breezy, and stay rioting quietly.
We love you all more than air-conditioned armpits.
What?
Bye!
Quiet Riot is an audio production from Cooler Heads, written and produced by Andreou, Naomi Smith, and Kenny Campbell. Music by Mariana Sangeeta, artwork by Simona Canelu, and edited by me, Alex Reese.
Quiet Riot. There's not much going on at the moment, is there?
It's been like this every blooming week since 2008.
I know.
Just stop it now. I can't.